Welcome to the Therapy Show podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard. In each episode, I interview a seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapist from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. And if you're considering a career in the counseling field or just want to hear about what it's like to be a talk therapist, then this is the podcast for you. I am excited to announce that 2 episodes are now approved for continuing education contact hours. Episode 2, an overview of eating disorders and treatment, and Episode 3, using meditation and Ayurvedic life coaching as tools in your practice. We are working behind the scenes to get the website finished so you can purchase the courses. But in the meantime, head over to my website, lisamustard.com, to grab your discount on your first course purchase. That's lisamustard.com, and you'll see a sign-up box on the homepage. Okay, today's episode is dedicated to my talk therapist friends who have experienced or are experiencing burnout and compassion fatigue. And this is a topic I know all too well as I hit it about 18 months ago. Yet I don't think we talk about it enough in our profession. So when I connected with Sherry Collier and we began chatting, I was excited to learn that she too had been through this and she was open about her story and journey. I knew I wanted to bring her onto the show. So today's guest, Sherry Collier, is a licensed marriage and family therapist and expressive arts therapist turned life and business coach. She started Women Who Thrive, a community for creative women who want to heal their burnout and create something new with their rediscovered passion. She coaches therapists, creatives, and other caring professionals through the burnout recovery phase and into the new life work they want to create. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Therapy Show. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard. And today on the show, I have a very special guest. Her name is Sherry Collier, and I'm going to let her introduce herself to you all. But once again, this is an incredible person that I met through social media. You can meet amazing people on social media when you hang out in the right places. So welcome to the show, Sherry. How are you today?
Hi, Lisa. Thanks so much for having me. Yes, we met. Didn't we meet on Jonathan Van Vegen's Online Therapist Academy?
Yep,
I think
that's the space, and that's such a great group. Such a great group. And Jonathan was on an episode, oh gosh, I can't remember the number, but just a couple weeks ago talking about
I saw that.
Yeah, it was the last time.
Yeah. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Sherry Collier. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in California, but I have moved. I sold my practice and moved to Tennessee, where my license is not recognized here. And I chose not to go back to school and take the board exams again after 25 years. It's like, not doing that. So my specialties when I was in private practice, I was an expressive arts therapist, as well as trained in cognitive behavioral and lifespan integration. I don't know if you've heard of lifespan integration, but it does the same thing. It accomplishes some of the same things as EMDR.
Gotcha.
So it's really good for trauma. It works really well with anxiety and depression, kind of a whole host of things. But so those are some of my specialties. And now that I'm here in Tennessee, I've kind of broadened my horizons a little bit, and I'm doing life and business coaching for not only for other therapists who want to start their private practice and grow it, but also just for women dealing with burnout, and they're trying to find their new thing for their second act.
Yep.
So I think I saw some posts from you the other day, about we approach middle age and we start to think about, okay, how can we do something new? So
Right.
That's kind of where I am.
Well, I think that your niche is fabulous. And I find it fascinating that you are an LMFT, but you decided not to go after the Tennessee licensure. And I understand. I mean, I truly understand that decision. And I know you and I have talked a little bit about that privately. Would you mind sharing a little bit with the listeners what happened and, where you were with your burnout and just the decision to kind of not do a whole lot of clinical work?
Yes, I would say I had been kind of approaching burnout on and off for several years by the time we decided that we were going to be moving out of state. And so it came at a really good time for me to just sell the practice and kind of close that chapter. And I knew I was going to do something different. When we moved, I kind of had that in my heart already. I didn't know exactly what it was going to be, and I was kind of open to some different things. But for me, when I look back on, okay, what were some of the causes of the burnout? I think it's really like any other job in some ways. And then you have a whole additional layer on top of that because there's the whole compassion fatigue element. When I used to I would tell my sisters that when I would come home from work, my face would hurt because I was leaning in and going, like, making that like interested, like, oh, that compassion face.
Yeah.
Like you're empathizing with people so much, your face hurts.
I totally can relate. And in fact, as you were doing your face, I was thinking, what does my compassion face look like? So everybody listening right now, I want you to imagine your own, you know what we're talking about, talk therapist.
Yeah, yeah. It was both. It was the kind of just the regular burnout with that whole little added layer of compassion fatigue, which compassion fatigue is kind of a blend of vicarious trauma and burnout. And because I was trained in lifespan integration, of course, I was taking out a lot of trauma cases. And we're talking about, I'm not necessarily talking about veterans, but I am talking about people who were abused when they were little, or even people that had a recent, very, very traumatic experience, even a car crash. Sometimes people can be traumatized by a car crash, and there's certain things that you can do. And so I don't know if you know anything at all about lifespan integration, but they do have to describe their trauma to you in pretty good detail. So I'm also very artistic, and I picture everything very vividly. I've got this vivid imagination, which I think is, a blessing and a curse. And so when they would describe their situation, their trauma, I was picturing that every time they would describe it. And, as a therapist, vicarious trauma happens as a result of that. Not only hearing it, but we're picturing it in the mind. And it's almost as if our brain is going through that with them.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do that for years and years and years, it just adds up. It just adds up, and it kind of sucks the serotonin right out of your head.
Yep.
So you can actually experience what looks like depression when you're experiencing compassion fatigue. And so I would very much say it shares quite a few symptoms with depression. So for me, also looking back, I think that I'm the kind of personality that likes to really dive in and like, let's go, let's get after this, and very, like, I don't do anything halfway.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm going to dive in with a client, I'm going to dive in. I'm not just going to sit there and nod and smile like the kind of the television portrayal of therapists. That's not me at all. I'm getting in there, I'm using art, I'm doing whatever I need to do to help that client. And I think that looking back, I should have learned to develop better psychological boundaries, like a better way to somehow create a healthy barrier. And see, I don't even know if I'm capable of doing that because I have this whole artistic side going too. It's just a very natural thing for me to just feel somebody else's stuff. I can kind of walk into a room, look at their face, and I'm feeling it. I'm already feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if I were to ever go back and return, I would need to experiment with some, different ways to be able to compartmentalize and to really have those psychological boundaries. I had good verbal boundaries. I had good, that your session starts and ends, those kinds of boundaries were in place. But so there's definitely some things that contribute, I think, to why do some therapists experience compassion fatigue and others don't. I think we probably all experience just a little bit of it, and then others of us experience it a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
So So as I mentioned, I'm an artist at heart, and using expressive arts therapy, I was always helping somebody else create art for the purpose of expressing. And so I finally, when I moved here, I started taking all these art classes, Lisa, and it was so much fun. They were all online, but I was learning acrylics and painting, oh my goodness, flowers and beach scenes and all sorts of stuff. And that has been so refreshing because it's for me. I'm doing paintings of things that I like to look at, things that are pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it when somebody else thinks it's pretty. In therapy, we're taught to be so, it's all about the client, it's all about the client, it's all about the client, that we almost, it's like, I don't know if it's fair to say this, but it's almost like we disappear as real people. I mean, I never was fake, but you can't share of yourself too much. You have to be very careful about that. And I found it very freeing that now I'm doing these paintings and I can share of myself. And now somebody else can say, Sherry, I love that painting. And I can just absorb that and be like, oh, cool. Thank you.
Right. Right. You don't have to process their feelings about your painting for them. You're
Right.
just happy to
Right.
get the positive, joyful feedback. Oh, I can so understand. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm over here just like nodding my head going, you're speaking my language. For sure. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I continue to do is continue to paint. And I was posting pictures of my paintings on my Facebook page just for kicks and grins. And people started asking me if they could buy them. It's like, oh, I'm not sure I want to sell these. So some of them were kind of close to my heart. So, but then I started creating a few that weren't so close to my heart that I could sell, I could part with. And that's been fun too. It's
Mhm.
like a whole different thing selling a product versus a service.
Yeah.
So that's been just kind of an interesting foray. I'm not going full tilt into that because I prefer to kind of keep my art more as a hobby and more as a thing for me for healing. But what I am starting to do, Lisa, and it's been really fun, is I'm starting to teach other women who are kind of like me. They may be approaching 50 years old. They may be burned out. They may have this creative part that they haven't been able to nurture in their career. And all of a sudden they're like, I want to paint. I have to paint.
Right.
Or whatever, not necessarily paint. So I'm starting to kind of teach some expressive art exercises and art journaling as warm-ups, as creative development, and helping women process their burnout with their art. And so that's become a fun new approach for me in this second chapter of life. So
That's
that's where I kind of stand.
Well, that's really exciting. And it's really cool to hear how you've taken something that's helping and healing you. And now you're giving that gift to are they talk therapists or are they just, anything?
There's anything. Yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot of different types of women. I started a group called Women Who Thrive, and that it's a Facebook group. And that's just kind of a wide range of women in all different kinds of careers, and some of them are done with their careers and have retired, and some of them are looking for a hobby, some of them are looking for a new career, some of them are starting creative businesses.
Mhm.
And so they're all in different places, but yeah, it's been fun.
It's a great group. I know I'm in there. I recently joined your group and
Yeah,
it's a really warm and welcoming and a really friendly environment. So thank you for having me in there. I'm
sure,
loving what you're
sure.
sharing.
Trying to make it warm and friendly, yes.
So as you're talking, I'm wondering, I'm kind of going with my own thoughts and feelings right now and asking this question. And maybe I should just go ahead and self-disclose as a talk therapist who does this work and has a specialty. I almost feel ashamed and guilty that I have hit compassion fatigue and burnout in my
Hmm.
clinical work. And this is like the first time I've ever said this out loud. And I was thinking about it earlier that I wanted to kind of ask you about that. Did you experience any type of shame or guilt around kind of hitting that wall? Like, I should know better. I'm a therapist. I should know better.
Yes, yes. I don't know if I felt it in exactly the same way. I don't think that I had a ton of guilt or shame, but what I did feel, well, maybe there was some thrown in there. So I'm kind of processing it even as we speak a little bit. But I think what it was for me, I was in some leadership roles. So, like for CAPS, which is Christian Association of Psychological Studies, I was the leader of that meeting. We had a local chapter meeting, and I was the leader for a couple years. And so when you're in any kind of leadership role, you kind of feel like you have to have it all together. Like you're not allowed to talk about being burned out. You're not allowed to talk about compassion fatigue because, like you said, you're a therapist. You should know better. You should be doing more self-care. You should be doing, there's all these shoulds. And honestly, Lisa, I was doing self-care up the wazoo.
Right.
It wasn't a lack of self-care. It was that truly trauma had built up.
Yeah.
Truly it takes a toll. It
Right.
just takes a toll. So I've learned to just kind of like, you know what? I don't care. You go ahead and think whatever you want to think about me. I know that it's okay to have compassion fatigue. It's the same thing. You hear people who, let's just take bipolar disorder. You hear people who struggle with bipolar, they'll talk about how, you know what? I just had to finally start talking about it and telling people, yeah, guess what? I have bipolar.
Mhm.
And they finally just had to own it and be like, yeah, and not worry about what people think, not worry about the stigma, because it's when you are able to talk about it and have this open dialogue and people understand kind of where you're coming from, that's when you're free. You're more free. So I don't know if that's similar to what you experienced or not, what I just
Mhm.
described. Is it?
Yes, and I was actually processing my own stuff as you were talking about, being in the leadership role as well as finally talking about it. But yeah, I feel like what you're saying is resonating with me and in a leadership role as well as just being able to talk about it. And I do know that
Mhm.
one of the things that has really helped me, and maybe you had this as well, is like a peer group where you can go and you can get peer supervision with a close knit group of other therapists that you trust. This episode of The Therapy Show is sponsored by my favorite fitness apparel, Zaya Active. I recently discovered Zaya Active when I went looking for high quality and premium workout clothes. Just like those luxury store and catalog brands, yet I wanted a budget friendlier price tag. I love this brand because number one, I live a very active lifestyle. I hit the gym about 5 days a week. Plus, I love to go for runs and long walks, which I consider to be my very important self-care and podcast listening time. Plus, the endorphins I get from my workouts keep me in my happy mental space. The clothes stay put, I'm not constantly pulling on my leggings or tugging on my sports bras, and they accentuate me in all the right places. And number two, when I work from home, I love to be comfortable in leggings, also known as yoga pants, and a tank top. Plus, I can transition to running out the door to pick up our girls or run errands while still looking put together in my athleisure styles. My favorite workout leggings are the light and tights, and my favorite everyday wear are the everywhere pants. I literally wear them everywhere, every day. I can even wear them to business meetings or client consultations. I can dress them up or down easily. Want to learn more? Head over to lisamustard.com and click on the activewear page. You can learn all about Zaya Active, the mission, the clothes, and see if they are a fit for you and your active life. From weight training to running to Zumba to yoga to CrossFit to bar to walking to tennis, Zaya Active has you covered. And don't forget about the active men in your life. They have an amazing men's line, plus clothes for active kids too. That's Zaya like papaya active. So see my site for all the details. Did you have something like that?
I really didn't because I was kind of in that leadership role and then I was a private practitioner. I think so. Here's another piece of my burnout. As a private practitioner, I had to wear all the hats. months, I had to do it all. I was my marketing department. I did the invoicing. I did everything. I cleaned my office. I did everything. And I had, when you're, as you use the word on, when we're with our clients, we're on. We can't just like look off into the distance and take a minute to daydream. No, we can't do that. We're on. And when you're on over and over, hour after hour, your brain just gets tired. That's all. Your brain just gets tired and it has to have breaks. But no, I didn't have that peer group where I could really, truly open up. I could say little things. Like I did have that group that I went to, that some therapists that were closer friends, they knew more about what I was thinking about and dealing with the burnout and with compassion fatigue. But no, I really didn't open up and share too much. And that's kind of a sad commentary, because sometimes when we as therapists share with other therapists, sometimes we are judged. We're oh, you must not be doing self-care right. Oh, you must be, there's, maybe you're doing your sessions wrong. Or, yeah. So there's always like this quick temptation to jump in and try to fix it. I find with other therapists. So I just shut my mouth. I just kind of kept it to myself. And like I said, I had a few trusted friends. And those were precious. Those few trusted friends still are precious because I still have them. But one was a therapist. One was not a therapist, but had been in kind of a ministry position. So they understood from ministering to large groups of people, like at a church or at a, nonprofit or something. So I did have those friends that I could be open with, but maybe that's where the shame and the guilt part did come in for me, is I didn't feel like I could really open up and share that with big groups of therapists. But I'm over that now, because here I am talking all about it.
Yeah.
And I'm here to say, if you're a therapist and you're experiencing this, don't have guilt or shame.
Yeah.
Just understand your brain gets tired like everybody else's. Your brain gets tired. Your body gets tired. And sometimes self-care means, in some cases, getting out of the field, making a change. When you're older and you have that ability, go for it. If you want to get back into it and remain in the field, then also go for that. But figure out how to be open and honest and just be like, yeah, my brain's tired. I'm going to figure out how to approach things in a way that my brain doesn't get so tired.
That's really good advice. And I will be taking that for sure. I think for me, it's my brain can get tired, yet also my emotions can get kind of stunted. And so I find myself sometimes going, oh yeah, here's another issue around that. And so I kind of I start to kind of zone out a little bit. And then what's hard for me is that I come home and I'm just kind of burnt. I don't feel like I don't have any emotion in me, and I don't want to talk to people. Sometimes I don't want to talk to anybody. Now I do.
Right.
No, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm here for my family. I work really hard to set that, draw that line in the sand. Like, I'm not taking this home with me. This has nothing to do with my personal life. But I find that socially, I don't want to go out or girls' night out. I'm not interested. But I also think that's part of my personality. Maybe I'm an introvert. I do gain energy or draw energy from alone time. And so I think that, we all have to recognize where we are personality wise.
Yes. But
it's hard. And do you have any suggestions for when you feel a little emotionally tapped out from your work?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've so been there. And I'm not through it. I'm still working through it. It's a process. It's a long process. But what I would say is, I had the same thing. I would come home and I would want to kind of just stay in the house and isolate. I didn't want to go and hear my girlfriends talk about their husbands or anything, because I'd just been I did a lot of couples therapy too, so I'd just been listening to that all day. So I did want to just be alone to rejuvenate. And I'm not an introvert. I'm actually an extrovert, a very strong extrovert on the Myers-Briggs. So, but I'm an ENFP, and I don't know how much you know about Myers-Briggs. ENFPs can have an element where they must have alone time. It's one of those quirky combinations of letters that does kind of put them in that introverted category as far as needing that alone time. So I definitely can relate to everything that you just said. And in terms of coping with it, dealing with it, I had to just minimize how many people I was having really emotional discussions with. I just had to pick and choose. Like, okay, who's really important to me to be able to go deep with them? Well, my husband, my children, my mom, my dad, my family, certain friends I could go deep with. And then the rest of it, no, I just kind of kept that really light and shallow and not didn't go too deep with them, which is very unlike me as an extrovert. As an extrovert, I want to be everybody's friend,
Mm-hmm.
and let's talk about everything. I didn't want that anymore. So therapy, being a therapist I've heard that from other people too. So I know we're not alone in
Mm-hmm.
that. But does that speak?
That's okay. You definitely spoke to it. Maybe I was just looking for some validation that I'm not the only one because it's not something that we post on Facebook about. It's not something
Right.
we share on Instagram a lot. And I do think that it's
Right.
changing a little bit, and I think
Yeah.
that it has to do with just being transparent and open and genuine. Yet at the same
Yeah.
time, we don't want to turn off potential clients, if you're trying to market
Right.
yourself. So that's a whole other probably episode that we
Yeah.
could go into. How
Yeah.
much do you self-disclose on social media? How much do
Right.
you self-disclose, with friends or acquaintances? Because it's a very bizarre career to be in that
It
sense,
is.
I
Yeah.
mean, but I think it's cool that we as a group are kind of coming out of that and are meeting
Yeah.
the times and learning how
Yeah.
to use our skills and use being authentic and transparent in for the
Yes.
good to
Uh-huh.
help lower the stigma of mental health or
Yes.
counseling. So I do think that's a very good positive thing that's coming out
Right.
of kind of therapists being able to,
Mhm.
move into that. But I do think there's a shift in talk therapists and, the old guard, as we would say, is kind of moving out. Like my
Uh-huh.
supervisors, my mentors, they're starting to retire. They're starting to do other
Yeah.
things. And so you have,
Uh-huh.
me, Gen Xers kind of like coming up and being
Uh-huh.
leaders out there, and we aren't afraid of trying new things. We're not afraid of kind of
Right.
disrupting the status quo. So and then
Right.
the millennials are like, hey, let's use this social media thing, and let's do this telehealth, and let's do all this stuff, and it's
Uh-huh.
just shifting. And I do
Yeah.
think it's neat. I do think it's really cool that
Yeah.
traditional.
There's some good things happening, and I would be really in agreement with you that there were a lot of things that we were taught. I mean, I just remember in school, I remember them putting the fear of God into me that if I said one thing wrong, I could be sued. And if I did one thing wrong and didn't cross that T or dot that I on my notes or, anything, not only could you be sued, but, the government could go after you. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
just really heaped on the fear. They used a
Yes.
lot of fear, at least in my schooling, about sticking so carefully to these ethics and
Mhm.
boundaries. And I do think there's a need for a good healthy boundary in a session where you're not self-disclosing to the point where you're turning your client into the therapist.
Right.
But I tend to self-disclose a little here and there because there are times when people just need to hear, "Oh, okay. So you dealt with this too?" And then suddenly you become real and human and not just this person nodding and smiling. So I do think that that's very helpful. And I had something interesting came up with a gal. I'm a part of. I'm actually paying to be a part of a marketing group where I'm learning more about marketing. And there's this gal in there who's not a therapist, never been a therapist, but she's kind of considered herself a coach to moms, kind of teaching them gentle parenting and different things like that. And she was kind of posing a question about how much should she disclose because on social media because she knew her mom was going to read it. And so it was like, oh yeah, that brought up all kinds of wonderful thoughts in my mind and discussions. And it was like, yeah, there are things. I think there's a way to disclose, and I told her, I have a 17-year-old and a 21-year-old. So I'm getting closer to where now they're going to start talking about, Mom, I remember when you did this and I hated it.
Mhm.
So it's like, as parents, now I know what we want as parents, and I know what kids need to be able to do. Kids need to be able to talk about what went wrong with their parents' parenting. They need to be talk about how something hurt them or wounded them. But they also, now that I'm a parent on the other side, as parents, we know we screwed up, right? We know we did things wrong. So we want them to be able to disclose and talk to us about the things that we hurt them in. And it's okay if they post on social media, hey, my parents used such and such timeout, or let's just pick something, and they did timeout in a certain way and it just really didn't work and blah blah blah. And it's like, but then if they turn around and say, but you know what, I know my parents love me and they did the best they had with the tools they had at the time. So I was telling this to this gal. I'm like, there's a way maybe to self-disclose
Mhm.
that's balanced, that's not being disrespectful of your parents, your mom, but that's also being somewhat honest and doing the self-disclosure thing so that you can build rapport. Because it is hard to build rapport over social media without some self disclosure. So, yeah, that's a whole interesting conversation for therapists to start having about self disclosing on social media and how much of that. For me, it all comes back to the heart.
Mhm.
Okay, why am I doing this? Why am I self disclosing? Am I hurting? Do I need help? Then I need to go to someone who can help me and not self disclose just yet.
Right.
But if I'm putting it out there because I think somebody can benefit because I learned a valuable lesson from something, great, awesome, put it out there. But yeah, I think that we're seeing a change in the therapist community, and the whole coaching thing has changed things as well. And now that I'm doing coaching as a therapist, there's so much freedom in coaching, but yet I think the coaching industry needs what we have.
Yeah.
We have a deeper understanding. Like when we're coaching someone, we can see, we can recognize, oh, it's not just that they're stubbornly persisting in a certain mindset. They're depressed.
Right.
They need serotonin somehow.
Right.
They need to do something to get the juices going again. So I think we're kind of coming into a very valuable new
Mhm.
role
Yeah.
as being able to do some coaching and educating, call it whatever you want, mentoring, and having that background, that training in the mental health.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you. Completely agree with you. I think it's an amazing time right now for clinical therapists, psychotherapists, talk therapists to get into the coaching world if they want to. You don't have to, but
Right.
man, there is a lot of freedom in coaching. And it's funny, I have more energy for coaching than I do for therapy. So
Yeah.
if somebody comes to me and say they want coaching, I don't just agree right away. We need to talk and
Right.
assess what's really going on because you might need therapy more than you need coaching.
Exactly.
And so I want to be honest with the person that I'm connecting with and get as much information as I can because I don't want somebody who goes, "Oh, well, Lisa can't coach me." Who's a coach out there that can? And then, if they're coming to me, I want to make sure I give them what I can.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. And also the cool thing about coaching is, it's wide open. Like
Yeah.
you don't, I'm only licensed in South Carolina, but I've coached women
Right.
in New Jersey. And
Right.
that's very different. It's a different model, but
Yeah.
it's also very valuable. And
Yeah.
yeah, we could probably do a whole other episode on
Yeah.
counselors as coaches. And maybe that would be a really great episode. So if you guys want that episode, go to my Facebook page, The Therapy Show, and let me know if that is something of interest to y'all. Because I think that would be really a fascinating, a coaching model for counselors if somebody wants to grow
Yeah.
into that. So this has been such a great
Yeah.
conversation, Sherry. I'm just so glad that you've come on and we're just having this open talk. It's really helpful for me. I feel like
Thank
we're
you.
doing my own therapy here a little bit, and
No, it was great,
this
Lisa.
is
Thank
really
you.
fun. So I know right now you're kind of like the future may not be so crystal clear, but if you had to guess what would be next for you, what do you think that would be?
Well, I actually am fairly clear now.
Oh, good.
I have a little bit of a landing page up,
Okay.
womenwhothrive.com, that I have a free report that I created about burnout and about rediscovering your passion. So that's kind of where I'm headed, is
Awesome.
helping women, particularly, like I said earlier, women like me who kind of have a personality type that's got this creative need and it hasn't been fed properly, and they're kind of wanting to look into feeding that and nourishing that and doing something new with it.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where I'm headed, is helping other women be able to do that, to create something new, to leave the burnout behind and like let's jump into something new. And so I'm doing that and doing my art, but the art, like I said, is kind of more just for fun. But sherryjoycollier.com is another website where I do talk a little bit more about some of my consulting and coaching, as well as some of my art stuff. So there's an art journaling guide that people can download for free on sherryjoycollier.com too. So that's kind of where I'm headed. I'm sure things will evolve and change, and I see some retreats coming in the future having to do with art. Can't wait to do an art retreat. I'm so excited to put
Oh,
an art retreat together, where we just have so much fun dabbling with all kinds of different art. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm headed, and we'll see. We'll see. The sky is the limit.
well, that's really exciting. And we will link your websites to the show notes for sure so people
Oh,
can go
thank
and,
you.
oh, yeah, and check you out. And if they want to join your Facebook group, is that something they can just get on Facebook and do?
They can get on Facebook and do that. That's women. Oh, the URL I think I had to make a little different, but if they just do a search for Women Who Thrive group,
Okay.
the one it's closed, but it's not private. So I do have a private group that people pay to get into, but the one that's free it's Facebook calls it closed, but
Mhm.
it's you don't have to pay to get in,
Gotcha.
is my
Okay.
point. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we'll link all of that to the show notes. Is there anything else you want our listeners to know before we end today's episode?
I guess just that there is life after counseling and there's life after 49.
Yeah. Woo.
And it can be quite fun.
Yes, I totally agree with you. I feel like I'm just kind of hitting my stride with having fun with the show and bringing on some incredible guests like you. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for being here. This has
You're
been just
welcome.
awesome.
Thank you for having me. Your show has had a lot of awesome people on here. So, yeah,
Oh, well, thank
thrilled.
you. Thank you so much.
Take care, Lisa.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine. Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content. And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.